All right, what is going on, everyone? And welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to discuss the latest news, rumors, and recap Mets spring training in Port St. Lucie. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel if you have not already for new episodes of our show that will be after today, now be recorded after every single series of games during the regular season. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to turn on your post notifications to know when we go live. For those of you in the live chat right now, we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns, all of that great stuff. You feel like you're being ignored, you aren't. We're just going to be starred throughout the show. We'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok, future content over there. For our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day. And also make sure to give us a 5-star review. That would be greatly appreciated. So, Frank, you are here. Spring training has officially wrapped up. We have 162 games ahead of us later this week, which I'm sure we will preview in a few days. But it's great to have that little anxiety feel, that nervousness before games start. So do you have that type of feeling? Because I feel like we're gonna have a few days here where there's no baseball and we're just anticipating the fun to start in Houston this time.
Yes, no, I mean, like you said, now is the time to really, these games count. It's time to overreact. So when I see things that I don't like, I can actually flip out and I can't say, oh, it's just spring training. Got to stay calm. So now we get to do our overreactions. The fun part begins. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and there's tons to unpack before we even get into those games. And Frank, today we have a very special guest to help us do that as well. You may recognize him as the Mets main reporter and publisher for SportsIllustrated.com, or for his many various appearances on major network TV networks such as New York 1, CBS 2, NBC4, Fox 5, and Pix 11. You can also catch him as a reoccurring guest on ESPN New York 880 and WFAN Sports Radio 101.9. Please help us welcome the one and only Pat Ragazzo. Pat, welcome to the show. Great to have you on here to talk some Mets. I know that at one point you were notified as our guest with 2 G's in your name. I apologize for that. So now that we got everything spelled properly, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Well, thanks, Carson. Thanks, Frank. I'm glad to be here. And yeah, 1 G or 2 G's and 1 Z, but it's actually the other way around. But that's okay. It's not the first time someone's done that. So glad to be here and chop it up with you guys.
Yep. So 2 things for everybody in here before we get started. I want to let you guys know that if you have a question for Mr. Ragazzo here, leave it in the chat. We'll be sure to star it throughout the stream, and we'll be able to answer a few of those questions towards the end. So we have about a half hour here. And also, as well, I want to let you guys know to like the stream as well, because we don't say that enough. And also hit the subscribe button, like we have said before, for those of you watching on YouTube and on Twitter. So let us know for any questions that you guys may have, and we'll be sure to star them. Now, one thing that I do want to just full-on kick off here is talk about some of the positives that we've had in spring, because there have been many. We have seen a lot that has gone on in Port St. Lucie, of course, with the huge draw of Juan Soto. Of course, I saw that they had like the highest attendance in total in spring training. So there's a lot of anticipation, of course, going into spring training, going into this regular season. But there is one positive we have to talk about. Somebody that we have talked about many times on this show. Frank, you know where I'm going with, and that being Brett Baty. Brett Baty had a great spring this month, and we've talked about him numerous times. And I do want to give a little bit of a recap of what he did in spring, because I would say that after what we have seen compared to everybody else, he's definitely stood out a lot. It has been a spring awakening for Brett Baty. Obviously, the slash line over 1,200 OPS. one of the main things of emphasis that we've always talked about with Brett Baty is the launch angle, of course, lifting the ball, pulling fly balls, doing damage, and obviously competitive ABs, walking more than he did strike out this spring in these 59 plate appearances. He led all of the Grapefruit League in OPS. And of course, one of the main points of emphasis, of course, being his defense, which he played 44 innings at third base, and at second base 69, which is a new new position for him, which he played seldomly in AAA last year. And it seems like this would be the last chance here for Baty to make an impression going into opening day, which he's going to be on the opening day roster with the injury to Jeff McNeil. So, Pat, I will start with you and ask you the big question off the bat. Is this something that you're full on buying into? Do you think that this is finally the year that Brett Baty puts it all together and finally proves himself as a major leaguer?
Well, it's funny. I was talking about this with someone yesterday, and I actually published a story on Mets on SI on my site earlier this afternoon with a rival scout who I spoke to, who said he thinks Baty's going to ball out this year, and that now this is going to be the year that he's the prime breakout candidate for the Mets. And it's funny how things work that way. And I kind of finished up my piece with this in the closing paragraph, saying like Baty was a change of scenery candidate all winter, and everyone, talking about from the fans' perspective, couldn't wait to trade him away and give him up for nothing. It seems like in those silly mock trades that we all kind of see conjured up from time to time. And now he's a breakout candidate for the Mets, and he had a very strong spring. And yeah, I am buying in. I mean, this is a guy who was the number 2 ranked prospect in the Mets farm system in 2022. He's not a top prospect anymore, but he's still just 25 years old. He has a lot of talent, a lot of upside. That's why the Mets didn't just give him up for nothing. That's why they still believed in Brett Baty. Everyone who I spoke to, all offseason long, still believed in the upside there. And there is a ton of upside, as we've seen. Todd Zeal actually was on the call for one of the recent Grapefruit League games. I believe when Baty had a big game over the weekend where he hit his 3rd homer. I know he homered for the 4th time today to close out Grapefruit League play. But when he hit his 3rd homer, Baty is no longer letting go of the bat with one hand when he swings on the follow through, and he's staying in his swing plane a little longer in the hit zone. And it seems to really have made a difference. And, the power's been there. And if we were giving out MVP awards for Grapefruit League play, Brett Baty would be the MVP of the Grapefruit League play. So obviously these games don't count, and the Mets want to see it translate. But Baty got off to a hot start last year. And then, of course, he fizzled out, and he wound up losing his job to Mark Vientos, because Vientos was last year's breakout player of the year for the Mets. So, I am, to answer your question, definitely reiterating that I'm pretty bought in. I think that these numbers, will translate for Baty, and he's going to get his opportunity at second base. Looks pretty good there defensively, even though he's not a natural fit given his body size and his build for the position. But he looks like he's handled it pretty well so far. And I think that he's going to probably turn some heads as the regular season gets set to begin here.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that he does. And even though that may come to shockers to some of you that are watching on Twitter who think that I am, the biggest Baty hater known to man. But again, I think when it comes to Baty, it all really just has to do with the consistency with some of these balls that he's putting in play, whether he is hitting them on the ground, whether he is lifting them. Obviously the swing and miss, it obviously elevated at the major league level as to if he was, playing against, major league arms towards minor league arms. There was a lot of swing and miss, but we never really had that scouting report initially of him, just taking a bunch of uncompetitive swings. So, I mean, when it does all said and done, and Frank, I will move it over to you here. One thing I will say from his spring so far, the competitiveness of his ABs have been on a different level as compared to what we have seen in the past, which I will say, as for some of the, batted ball of what he puts into play, it still comes to question with me. But, we will see what happens with Brett Baty, but he's definitely going to get his chance. especially with Jeff McNeil on the shelf for maybe a little bit longer than we expected that he would be. So, Frank, what are your thoughts on Baty? Have they changed? Have they not? I mean, again, it's been 59 plate appearances here. Who knows what's going to happen? But again, I think he definitely showed out here in Port St. Lucie.
Yeah, we talked about it in previous episodes, but we've seen Baty perform well in spring before. 2023 he hit really well. He hit 325, OPS of 885. But this spring, leading the Grapefruit League, that OPS above 1200. That's because of the more extra base hits he's getting, a lot more doubles. We saw the 4 home runs and those adjustments that he's made. And you really saw in today's home run, you see both hands on the ball, and you really feel like he's using his hands to kind of guide it and really drive the ball out there, and it goes right over the wall. And they were saying on the broadcast they thought it was going to be a double, but it ended up carrying out. So it has been very nice to see. He was, like Pat said, a top 50 prospect for a reason, one of the higher third base prospects. I mean, we saw talent in there. It was just that consistency that we were still waiting on. But what I wanted to move on to was in your piece today, Pat, talking about Brett Baty, the rival scout, talked about the open-mindedness of the current front office as the kind of player that would have blossomed for Stearns when he was in Milwaukee. And in the past on this show, we've talked about how we feel that the Mets have had just so many changes in the front office, different GMs, presence of baseball operations. And a lot of times, if they did not draft a player, they would just move on from him. We would say on this show, it's a Brody guy. They got to make sure they get him out of the organization. But despite all the different GMs, presence of baseball operations, they've always kept Brett Baty. And you said in the article, the Mets never lost hope in the upside, which is why he was not traded in the offseason. So my question for you is, did you hear of maybe some teams that were trying to make a call for Baty, because you talked about he was a good change of scenery candidate? Is that something that the Mets were receiving phone calls like, hey, you know what? You guys have Brett Baty in the minor leagues. We could use a player like that. Is that something that you've heard this offseason?
Nothing really concrete there. I mean, there was nothing ever really seriously discussed, but with a player like Baty and with players like McNeil, who they were never going to trade, Marte, who I've done a lot of reporting on this offseason, who they're going to hang on to now, but they did discuss a trade for him. Like, there's conversations that are held throughout the offseason between teams, between David Stearns, between members of the Mets front office, and between other executives and members of other front offices and around the league. And those are names that are brought up, but nothing really serious there, in terms of discussing a trade like with Marte, which, I had reported in December that they were talking to the Royals. It would have been a swap for Hunter Harvey and Marte. But with Baty, the trade value wasn't super high after last year. And the Mets weren't going to give him up. And it was the same thing for Jeff McNeil, too. I mean, Jeff McNeil had a very hot second half and then got injured in September, was able to make it back in the NLCS, but really wasn't, he didn't look fully 100%. He didn't get back to what he was doing in the second half post All-Star break, which was impressive. Now McNeil's hurt, of course, again, but yeah, the Mets weren't going to give up Jeff McNeil because of his floor. They weren't going to give up Baty because of his floor. They're not just going to dump these guys. And a lot of my replies this offseason were fans saying, well, why don't you trade McNeil? Why don't you trade Baty? Trade these guys? Well, again, like I just said, they're not just going to give these guys up for nothing when their trade value is super low, when, these guys could go be these change of scenery candidates going to another team and help another team, emerge into a contender or continue on their trajectory of contention. And now they have a star player. I mean, you look at McNeil, who won the batting title in 2022, has had, up and down season last year, a tough season in 23 and a tough season in 21, but he's had 2 or 3 really, really good years, all-star campaigns, batting title campaigns. And then you look at Baty as well, who, like we said, top 50 prospect in baseball not too long ago, top 2 in the Mets system, and has shown some flashes at the big league level. And we talked about Stearns, and the open-mindedness of the front office. Yeah, Baty is a guy who would have gotten more rope had Stearns, had say Baty played in Milwaukee in 2023, he would have gotten even more than the 108 games he got at the big league level. And it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't Buck Showalter's fault. It wasn't Billy Epler's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It's just the expectations in New York coming off an 101 win playoff season versus the expectations in Milwaukee. And no discredit to what Milwaukee did. I mean, they made the playoffs in 4 out of 5 seasons while Stearns was still there. And it's two differing, contrasting destinations and areas and expectations and everything where, it's easier for a young player to flourish in Milwaukee with the leash that he has being longer versus in New York, of course. And that just goes without saying and comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's just like internally with the Mets, like obviously we know that they have a lot of these infield pieces that eventually they're going to have to figure things out. Of course, somebody that hasn't even been in the conversation as much because of injury, Ronnie Mauricio is another one that we have talked about. We know that Jet Williams is in the higher levels now. We know that, of course, Jeff McNeil still being here. I mean, like, I feel like, personally with McNeil, I feel like it's just more of the thought of like, there's not really many that are willing to take that contract at this current moment. With Baty, obviously, reassessing the talent and the reassessing the trade value, obviously it makes sense of what they have here. And then obviously, waiting with Ronnie Mauricio, things like that. I feel like there is a way that they're going to probably trade eventually one of these pieces. But as of right now, there is a lot of value to be had or to be reclaimed with a lot of these guys, especially with last year, a lot of injuries in the minor league system. So I think that, it makes sense as to why they are doing it. But, I think that at this point, it will be probably a make or break for Baty this year. Definitely. Obviously with, Mark Vientos getting third base, which is his natural position. They have a lot of second basemen coming up through the system who could possibly, breathe down the neck of Jeff McNeil. You add Baty to that conversation as well. I think that right now the infield, there's a lot of questions going forward, but it also looks as a good problem to have where you have this youth in here that can, fill in the margins that way. I really think that at this point, you just look at the depth in one way, and you see that, some way, somehow it all is going to connect. It all is going to work itself out because injuries happen, regression happens. I mean, there's going to be ways where these guys do get these chances, and we'll see what they look like at the major league level. Frank, I'm sorry I cut you off there if you wanted to add something.
No, all good. I mean, no, that's kind of what I was going to touch upon too, like you're talking about with McNeil, is that let's just say that Baty does have that breakout. He's going to be maybe not the only day second base because they're facing left-hander Framber Valdez, but he's going to get a majority of the playing time. If Brett Baty does get off to a phenomenal start, he's not going to hit like he did in spring training, OPS 1200. But if he's really good and McNeil comes back and you start to see that like he's still not quite where they want him to be, that second half McNeil of last year, and you talked earlier about the rope that David Stearns would have gave Brett Baty. What do you think Jeff McNeil's rope would be this season? Because like Carson mentioned, not only do you have Baty in that conversation, but let's say Jeff Williams playing really good in AAA, and you have these other options. If McNeil starts to struggle again, how long do the Mets play that out before they kind of make more of a full-time switch to one of these other younger pieces?
Well, yeah, I think with McNeil, he is very versatile. He's a utility player. Like he's been the Mets starting second baseman, and that was the plan prior to him getting injured and straining his oblique in camp. But McNeil he can play second base. He can play left field. He can play right field. If he's hitting, even just like if he puts up close to the numbers he did in the second half last year, I believe 289, around a 800 something OPS, maybe 900 OPS. His OPS was really impressive in the second half. He had more power. We saw that, really on display as soon as the Mets broke into the second half in Miami. McNeil was hitting home runs, which isn't really his game. So yeah, I mean, I think that Baty is going to have a shot here. We'll see if Acuna sticks and is the righty bat to Baty's left-handed swinging bat. While McNeil is out. And we'll see. I mean, if we have a Mark Vientos situation and talking about Baty at second base, I don't see how the Mets could take him out of the lineup if he comes here and he's these numbers translating over to the major league level. But again, like I said, McNeil's versatility is what makes him valuable. That the Mets could play him at second, they could play him in left, they could play him in right. Mendoza even mentioned him as a backup shortstop option. Like, is he a guy who can give the Mets a couple innings and finish a game at shortstop if they ever needed him to, behind Lindor, who's the Iron Man at the position. Really never, even when he had the flu last year, the flu game, he still started the next day. Like, he just didn't make it fully through that game. And then he hit the walk-off, of course. So, I think that McNeil, there's going to be a spot on this team for him, given his versatility. And we'll see if he does get his second base job back, and really the ball's in Baty's court and the ball could be in Acuna's court. We'll see how things play out on the roster decisions in the coming days, and if Acuna does break camp with the team.
Yeah. I think it's really easy to just say, and we say this all the time with the pitching staff. A lot of people talk about, these names, they're not great names as compared to the Dodgers or whatever. 162 games have to be played. Someone's going to have to fill in the innings. Someone's going to have to fill in the games. And we'll see how they kind of, sprinkle that out. And I do want to talk about who will be playing or be available for playing those first slate of games. And that being, of course, the opening day roster, which has not really been completely figured out, but we do have a decent picture of it. And I want to talk about and pull it up here of what it looks like, because at this current moment, we do have a few injuries that have kind of skewered it from what we kind of expected before spring training starts. Obviously, with Jeff McNeil on the injured list, like we said, Frankie Montas going down, Francisco Alvarez will miss a chunk of the beginning of the season, and then Sean Manaea is a little bit far behind with the oblique injury. Could expect him back later this month. Or maybe in May, something like that. Now, as for a few of these guys that I have highlighted here in yellow, AJ Minter, it has not been completely made official that he will be ready for opening day. So we'll see what does happen there. We know that Luis Angel Acuna, they have not made that completely official yet, unless there was a report in between this stream starting to now. And then, of course, we have Huascar Brazoban and Max Kranick, who both have minor league options, who are kind of fighting for that last spot. It doesn't seem like it will be announced today, or maybe it will some point during the stream. Who knows? This is all going on live here. But, when it comes to, the full-on injured list of how this is all looking, Hayden Senger is expected to be the backup catcher as well. And, Frank, I will go to you on this one. I don't think that there's really many surprises here or anything. We all really kind of expected for things to fill in with these injuries, such as the pitching staff, the catcher situation. Hayden Senger, we already know he's a really good defensive catcher that pitchers like throwing to in the minor leagues. So he gets the chance, as I'm pretty sure he's a former Whole Foods employee. So congratulations to him. Quite a story. But I think right now this is pretty much what we've expected to fill in with the injuries. And, one point of emphasis that David Stearns did make, he said, this is a roster for just one day. This is a one-day roster, so changes could be made, and we've seen him make changes before. So I don't think there's really much to come to shock here. But, what do you think about the look of this opening day roster, Frank? What do you think?
Like you said, with how many injuries there are, there's not really many surprises. The only thing that kind of stinks is still with Daniel Nunez still working his way back. He starts the season in the minor leagues, where if he's fully healthy, he's got to be in that bullpen. He's just been great every time we've seen him on the mound. Even in spring training, while he's still working his way back, velocity's still up. He's still getting the job done for the most part. So he's someone that we will see on this roster hopefully soon. And then, like you said, the other big one is Minter. Kind of decide what they do there. He wasn't great today either. So then you're down to Brazoban and Kranick. And Kranick, they both pitch well today, Kranick and Brazoban. And I really like what I've seen from Kranick, especially because I kind of lean towards the younger guys, seeing what can this player be. When you have someone in Brazoban, 35, a lot of walks once he got some Mets after success in Miami. So I want to see Kranick get a shot. And then as far as Acuna, we touched on, maybe start with a platoon. Maybe he wins the job. Maybe he becomes more of a utility player since he has the reps at shortstop. We didn't really get to touch on it, but Brett Baty, they talked about maybe getting some reps at shortstop. Still hasn't quite happened yet. So Acuna right now will still be that main other option. If, like we said, Lindor's back, flu, anything ever happened, he would be your other guy. And also pinch runner. You have other guys here. Tyrone Taylor could also fill in that role as well. We didn't get to touch on Alexander Canario. He's been great this spring, but just looks like we're running out of spots, unfortunately. All of a sudden, now the Mets have a great outfit. Now we have too many outfielders. So adding Juan Soto will do that. He'll make your outfield plans a lot more tricky when we're talking about depth. So, like you said, a lot of the stuff is kind of filling its way out. It's just more so, I think Minter is the big one when you're deciding like that last bullpen spot.
Yeah, and speaking of Minter, I will go to you, Pat, directly on this one. This was a question that we had from D earlier on. Will Minter start on the DL or IL? I think that's what it's considered now. More time for more rehab. Have you heard anything of like, it's probably 50-50 at this current point right now. Like they're trying to figure out how he feels after today. That's kind of like the impression that I got from some of the reports that I saw before the stream started.
Yeah, with Minter, I mean, I haven't heard anything to this point, but look at where we are right now in the year. I mean, it's a very long season. He's a guy who they're going to need healthy for the bulk of the season and for the stretch run, of course. So there's no point in pushing him. I mean, if he's healthy, they're going to have him in the major league bullpen. I mean, I would say, like, if you're reading like tea leaves or anything, or looking at hints, I mean, Danny Young making the opening day roster in that bullpen, like that gives you insurance there with having a lefty in the bullpen, whether Minter is ready or not. If they give him a spot and maybe they don't want to push him too much, which again, they should not be pushing him this early if he's not ready, then they have their lefty in Danny Young, who they're going to use early on in the season. I mean, obviously every game counts in the season, and towards the end of the season, when it comes down to they're fighting for a playoff spot on the final day, that you look back, oh yeah, in April, like, if they won this game, if they had, if they had used Minter instead of Young or some, so-and-so, then, they wouldn't be in the spot, but it's hindsight's always 2020. And you know what, if they don't have Minter healthy this year, it's a big problem for the bullpen, especially looking at Edwin Diaz and his velocity dip in spring training so far this year. You don't really know, what kind of year he's going to have. And he had a very up and down year last year, which again,
yes, Diaz
was coming off of major patellar tendon surgery. And a lot of people didn't even know if he was ever going to be the same again. And down the stretch, he was very good. In the postseason, he was very good. He wasn't super lights out the way he was in 2022 before he tore his knee in 2023. But at the same time, he was still very good. But again, like his velo was significantly down in spring training. So you look at what they did with Dednil Nunez. I think it's a smart plan. And with Minter, I have not heard anything. But at the same time, they should not rush him, and they need to take things slow. And I've been saying that with Brandon Nimmo as well. But Brandon Nimmo all of a sudden had a very, very strong finish to Grapefruit League play, and he looks 100% healthy, and he looks like he's ready to have an all-star season. So I'm always in the boat of taking things slow with guys, and I think the Mets medical staff, it's credit to them. They've done a tremendous job the last few years, and that's the reason why Minter wound up signing here, and that's why David Peterson, coming off hip surgery last year, had a breakout year, and just
just going to bring that up.
There's a million reasons, and the proof's in the pudding the last couple of years with just the way the Mets medical staff has evolved over the past several years.
I'm not sure if it's the same surgery that Peterson had to Minter, because Minter is obviously recovering from that left torn labrum. I'm not sure if is that the same thing that
I think
Peterson got? I think it was.
I would have to look it up. It was, they had similar surgeries, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think the two pitchers talked about it. I think Minter had brought that up on the Meet the Apple podcast, the Mets official podcast. So I would have to go back and look at that. But I think that they had some similar hip procedure, and they did have a discussion about it. And it did, I think, kind of persuade Minter to decide to come to the Mets, which, hey, that's seems like the entire team's been recruiting star talent in free agency. It wasn't too many years ago that people were saying no one wanted to go to the Mets, and now apparently everyone wants to come to the Mets. So that's what winning does. I mean, cultural change and winning really does turn around a program and a franchise rather quickly, as we've seen.
Yeah, that's one thing that I will attest to as to, with the left-handed reliever type of thing. We've seen the Mets kind of go in and out of a lot of these guys year by year. There's been kind of not really a lack, but like the depth chart has definitely been spotty at times. We know that Danny Young has had his blow-ups at some points where he's making the opening day roster. We've made jokes on this show before, Frank, about the Sean Gilmartin versus Bryce Harper. Is like, don't bring this guy in just because he throws left-handed. Like let's give like if you have the depth of talent and you have guys who can get guys out and pitch to right-handers and left-handers like Minter can, it's going to be really, really important for him to stay healthy. Now, Pat, do you have time for one more question, which is basically just like that final debate, of course, of my guy Matt here from Mets Central. Obviously the great spring that Max Kranick has had. It's obviously clear that he said it's obviously clear he should get the final spot over Brazoban, especially since he has better control of the strike zone. We know that both of them have been said that they can go multiple innings in a stretch. We know that that's like kind of like the final thing. They both have minor league options left. Would you go with Kranick over Brazoban in this stage? They both have had actually really good springs. It's just Kranick has been, insane. That walk to strikeout ratio is insane for what he's been doing this month.
Kranick has certainly earned a spot. Brazoban's earned a spot too, but the competition's pretty hefty right now, and Kranick really, very much on the side of you gotta reward a guy like Kranick for the spring that he's just put on. It's got to be very exciting for the Mets and very promising to see Kranick do what he's done in Grapefruit League play. And yeah, they should want to see if it translates into the big leagues. It really could help them this year. So I think they know what they have in Brazoban. I think he's a solid arm. That's why they went out and acquired him at the trade deadline last year. The Mets have kind of tweaked and tinkered with him a little bit, and the spring, again, another promising sign is that Brazoban had a really good spring. He did struggle a little bit after they acquired him last year, but they really should see. I believe they should see what they have in Kranick at the big league level, and that the spots should go to him in the bullpen.
Yeah, definitely. We know that he's a big Mets fan growing up. And then there's quite a story. He got injured last year. He was on our postseason roster, didn't really pitch much, but we didn't get to see what he was made of. I think he was doing well in spring last year, and then he got hurt. So we'll see what he can do for us. Obviously, when it comes to him as an arm, I think that. I'm seeing like some of the stuff, the advanced stuff, he's grading out like with like 4+ pitches. This is some talent that maybe if it elevates to some way where maybe you're seeing this guy in the back end of the bullpen, like we saw with Danel Nunez come out of nowhere, where he was the 8th inning guy at some point. All right. So, Pat, thank you for joining us. Of course, if there's anything else you want to plug or let us know, anything that you're doing in the future, let the live chat know. But great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was a blast. And just check out my work and my work and my staff's work at si.com/MLB/Mets. Check out all our opening day, pre-opening day, and opening day coverage coming up this week. It's about to be a very busy season, and we made it. It's a long, it seemed like a long and a short off season all put together. Carlos Mendoza and I had spoke to him when I was at camp in February, and we both asked each other, "Are you ready?" I asked him, "Are you ready for year 2?" He said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "I don't know, kind of a fast turnaround from last year. We had a 8.5-month season, but now after the dog days of spring training at the Grapefruit League, I think I'm ready for opening day now, and I'm ready for the season to start." So excited to do it, and I'm sure we'll be talking more.
Yeah. I think that, at the pace of how that offseason went, it was pretty slow, I'd say, in terms of news. We had some spikes in there. So I think we're all ready to get some games going. So, Frank, if there's anything you want to last chance say hi or goodbye, I don't even know. I'm just rambling at this point.
Yeah, yes. We were really hoping for the Marte trade because we've been talking about it on the show constantly. We are like, oh, Pat, we were talking about this. Like you had mentioned December. Like we were saying in the offseason, like, and our other coach, Andrew, he's from Missouri. So he's like, oh, Kansas City, that's a perfect fit. And then like we said, oh, Pat said, like, maybe this could have happened. And we were like so upset. We like, dang, we wish that one went through. So, but,
Yeah.
that's just kind of, but maybe it works out well. I mean, maybe he turns out to have a good season. He's finally hit a home run. I mean, I've been talking about it since like, didn't
Yeah.
have one since June. He finally hit one the other day. So, but
Yeah.
we always look forward to seeing like latest stories. With Iglesias, same thing. We're like, oh my gosh, maybe the Mets bring him back, but
Thank
we'll
you.
see what
Yeah,
happens.
I appreciate it. I will say about Marte, he's got a lot of value in the clubhouse and on the field.
Oh yeah, we know he does. Oh yeah.
He's a veteran leader. And hey, he produced in a part-time role when he came back from his knee injury in late August. He did produce in that part-time role. That's what they envisioned him. Yes, he's making about $20 million this year, and that's not necessarily good usage of a roster, but the Mets don't have any really payroll constraints. And, they have Steve Cohen and it's the New York Mets and they have that budget. So Carlos Mendoza, I'll mention him again. He was a big advocate in wanting to keep Marte. Marte really, really wanted to stay. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. This is the last year of his deal. He wants to stay with this Mets team, and they all have the feeling that they have a chance to do something here. That's why guys like Jesse Winker came back, Sean Manaea, Pete Alonso. That's why Juan Soto came over here. Like everybody in baseball saw what the Mets were like in May, where maybe they were scaring the Juan Sotos away. That was the narrative. Yeah. And then what they were able to do and accomplish and 2 wins shy of the World Series after they looked. We were talking about 2025 in around Memorial Day weekend and a little after that. I remember
we were on this show. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I remember writing stories about who the Mets could target in free agency in 2025 in late May. So it really was a tale of 2 seasons last year. And I mean, the Mets, this is the most buzz, I would say, around this team in my 5 seasons of covering them. In terms of vibes in spring training, the first week, it's always like the first week of school, first day of school, when you're in that clubhouse in Port St. Lucie, when the official workouts begin. But this was the highest of vibes that I've been around. And 2022 was the only one that was kind of comparable here with in terms of vibes. But the Mets were coming off a pretty dysfunctional year in 2021, and 2022, they had a very talented team and spent a lot. So it was exciting. This is the first time that they've come off like a deep playoff run in my career that I've been around. And the excitement's there. And it's a lot of I know they didn't bring back Iglesias. They didn't bring back Quintana, but really it's a lot of the same face. They didn't bring back Severino either, but a lot of the same faces and veterans and chemistry. And, and now they have Juan Soto. So it should be a very interesting year to say the least.
Yeah. All right. So, Pat, we'll let you go. I'm sure there's plenty of work that you got. But thank you for joining us. And for those of you in here, his links are all in the description, including for his sportsillustrated.com. Follow him on Twitter. All those links are in the description in the YouTube as well. And you're also, I'm pretty sure, tagged on Twitter as well. So thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And hopefully we can see you at some other point.
Awesome. Sounds good, guys. Really was a pleasure. Love the graphics. And thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you for coming on.
All right. So one more time, guys, make sure to go follow Pat. All of his links are in the description. As we're going to keep going, of course, because we can yap forever and go on forever. You guys know we go for hour 45, 2 hours, it happens, but we kind of had to shrink it into kind of a window there for Pat there. But other than that, Frank, I'm going to move it over to you with the injury report of what we have latest going on with this team. We have some updates that are good and some aren't great, so I'll move it over to you. I think you're muted.
Okay, we got it now.
All right,
alrighty. So starting off with Sean Manaea, Mets starting pitcher, is currently throwing from 90 feet as he continues to progress well and is on pace to return to the Mets starting rotation in mid to late April. The veteran southpaw will begin the 2025 season on the injury list due to a right oblique strain. Matt Allen, Mets pitching prospect, was up to 99 miles per hour on his fastball while pitching 2 innings on the backfields in Port St. Lucie on Tuesday afternoon. The 23-year-old right-hander is expected to begin the 2025 minor league season on time this year. Allen has not pitched in a game since August 31st, 2019, before undergoing 2 Tommy John surgeries, an internal brace procedure, and a nerve correction since then. Ronnie Mauricio, Mets prospect, will stay in Port St. Lucie this week as the Mets break camp for opening day. The 23-year-old infielder is not expected to begin the 2025 minor league season on time as he continues to recover from torn ACL surgery that he underwent back in December of 2023. Jeff McNeil, Mets second baseman, has yet to be cleared for baseball activities as he is still having symptoms from his mild oblique injury he was diagnosed with over a week ago. The former All-Star is not close to returning after the initial expectation that he missed 3 to 4 weeks before returning to big league game action. I will say, just to touch on one of these guys, Sean Manai, I saw on YouTube, they had the workout video. He was pitching to Lindor, he was pitching to Vientos, so at least he's progressing.
Yeah.
I mean, we both talked about, like, they both have a right oblique injury. At least we're seeing Manai progress. Meanwhile, that report, McNeil, not like I talked about this when the injuries came out. Obliques, not all of them are the same. They're tricky. You start to ramp up, they kind of flare up a little bit. So at least one of them is progressing well.
Yeah, like we've seen Ronnie Mauricio, they're taking it slow with him. Of course, Matt Allen is definitely a good, a good story there. Good to see him back in the high 90s after all of the procedures that he has had. I think he's had like 4 in the last 5 years. I mean, it's been a long, long time for him. Brad's saying I can see Matt Allen being in this bullpen. It could happen down the line. I think that we're a few years away from him making his debut. It's all really about keeping him healthy this year. But I thought, because I'm Elmer Fudd, I saw some people in this chat talking about Steve Gelbs and his commentary and stuff like that. One thing I will say about Steve Gelbs, I do want to add here. So some people are, I think that he does a really good job at SNY, but play-by-play is just not his thing. I think that's pretty much, we know it's just not. One thing I will say about the booth, I do like Daniel Murphy as color commentary. I don't know about you, but I feel like he has a really good balance of the new school, old school type of thing that he can put in there. And I also heard him, he was talking about, singles kind of being obsolete if you're not a big, a fast base runner, and you're basically asking a guy to hit and do a double play with the amount of sinkers that guys throw. So it's like that type of adjustment stuff. I really do like him in the booth. Let's just say that. And it looks like Carlos is agreeing with me on that. So you never know. Like Gary, Keith, and Ron, they're getting up there. So maybe there's guys in the next generation that maybe we can put out there as future guys in that booth. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Gelbs, it's tough when you're trying to follow up from Gary Cohen because, like, we're used to something so great. So I feel like anything else we get is, like, almost not going to be satisfactory for us. And then for Keith and having Daniel Murphy, like, a lot of times with Keith, we talk about he's pretty much only the old school philosophy. So, like you said, having someone like Daniel Murphy as, like, a change of pace, just talk about some other things, some newer hitting approaches, that is nice to have as well. And he has a little more connection to the Mets because he was a much more recent player than Keith Hernandez, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, how that all evens out, of course. I'd love to see, kind of like that bounce off of Murphy and Keith maybe in one booth. I think that they're like the Nationals series. They said like they're going to be covering it or something like that. So we'll see how that works out. But other than that, I do want to get into another topic that is kind of, I don't know if it's taken a helium approach to the situation, because I had some other stuff planned for our show before this entire story comes out. Of course, we have to have some kind of, I'm not saying drama, but some kind of, I don't know, half and half type of thing with the Mets before opening day starts. It always seems like we can't just do a peaceful transition from spring to full-on regular season baseball. And we saw our leader, Francisco Lindor, not officially named captain, but seen as the captain in that clubhouse, kind of give a little bit of a rundown of the situation with Luis Angel Acuna. As we all know, last year in AAA, he did not do really that well. Then he comes up here, plays about 13, 14 games, and automatically explodes when Francisco Lindor was injured and down for a little bit. It seemed like Lindor didn't even leave for a few games at that current moment, and he definitely, at that point, kind of rose to the occasion there. And I think we've talked about it before, or it's been hinted before, but we didn't really see that be just completely established out of the mouths of any of the players. So I think that when it comes to Lindor, he's talking about it with Acuna of if maybe he was bored or like in AAA because he wanted to be in the majors at some point. I don't know what really the whole stance on was this, but I will give a little bit of a quote, and I will hint some other things going on here. It seems like, in a soft way, in a polite way, that Lindor's kind of sending a message here. Maybe we're misconstruing it. Maybe we're seeing this in a different way. But as for his performance in the minors to the majors, Lindor went on to say that I think that he plays bored in spring training. If the lights come on, then he is good. Last year in the minors, he was bored probably. He doesn't get amped up for it. It's rare when you see elite big leaguers or good big leaguers dominate the minor leagues. They just get bored. And then they eventually figure it out and say, I guess I got a little bit more to get called up. Then they get called up and it wakes them up. He acts like he doesn't care. And then when you act like you don't care, yeah, you're bored. He's not putting everything he's got into it. It doesn't feel like he's being challenged. Then after this entire situation unfolded, this entire quote that we got, of course, from Anthony DiComo, Joel Sherman of the New York Post says that the Mets have held off announcing an opening day roster in part because they're open to adding an righty infield bat, which almost certainly would lead Acuna to being sent to AAA. Now, we obviously have talked about the backup infielder situation throughout this entirety of spring. We know that Jose Iglesias was in that conversation. We expected, him being on a minor league deal. Some of us had our fingers crossed yesterday for a few hours that maybe he'd opt out and he'd come back or something. I think it's really, really hard to tell what type of message is being sent, or maybe he's just being full on honest in that way. But I do really like to see, statements like this where, he's not just completely sugarcoating it and saying he's the best there's ever been. And a lot of people on social media were saying that it's like Lindor rarely talks in this way about a teammate. Like, he's always someone who completely brings them up, knows what they're capable of, pushes them to be better. And when you see some of these, maybe he was just bored. I think we all thought it at one point, but it's really odd. Like, it is very odd to me to hear something kind of like this when it's coming from Lindor. And I think that it was it was something that obviously had to be said. But at the same time, you're like, is there a message being sent here? Is it too much to be, are we reading too much into this? I don't know, but we'll see. I don't know. Frank, what were your thoughts on this? Because it was very weird. Let's just say that it was very weird timing too, before all of this really, really started.
Yeah, I will say that I was surprised when I first heard Lindor say that, but Francisco did go on to say that he feels that Luis Angel Acuna has the ability to be a perennial all-star. So he
Yeah.
still is, like you said, in a sense, he still is talking about just how talented he is and like how much he believes in the player. But I do think that to have work ethic concerns or being bored at such a young age and not making it to the major leagues yet, that's not the greatest personality trait, I will say, when it comes to
Yeah.
a player. But it was pretty interesting when you look a little further into it because, I mean, if you remember when the Mets first traded for him, made the trade with Texas Rangers, Acuna was pretty high in the Texas Rangers farm system, got to Mets, he was high in our farm system. And then he got here in 2023 and he was doing very poorly. I mean, he had 243 in AA, OPS 622, only 2 home runs in 37 games. And, then the next year in AAA, he still wasn't that great, hitting 258. And we were seeing his prospect ranking drop as the season was progressing. And on this show, we were talking like, ooh, maybe Acuna is not all that great. Maybe the Mets should trade for someone else from Texas when they made that deal. And then he gets called up. We're like, oh, okay, they're going to call him up. Again, he hasn't really been great. But then he comes up here and he's phenomenal. And it's just very weird to be this much better in the major leagues than you are in AA because it's supposed to be, like Lindor said, a challenge, like much more difficult competition. It's been the opposite for Brett Baty and for Mark Vientos, where they were in AAA and they were out of this world. They come to major leagues. For Vientos, still good, but not the same level. Acuna, it was the total opposite. He became much better in the big leagues. So I think when I'm looking at a 37-game sample size in 2023 of 2 home runs in AA compared to 14 games in the major leagues of 3 home runs, that like you said, that's kind of weird. I mean, that is something that just doesn't commonly happen. So I do find it interesting, though, that like we've been talking about, if it wasn't for the McNeil injury, there was no guarantee that Acuna was going to make this team. So for him to be bored in spring training when he does not have a guaranteed job on the team is quite a tactic. I mean, because if you are David Stearns and you are Carlos Mendoza and you're watching Acuna not play all that great and you're seeing Baty do phenomenal, well, why would you be like, oh, well, he's not really trying? I mean, there's just something up there. Like, if a guy's just not trying, I mean, my concern that I would have long term is, let's say the Mets have a bad season, which they have had in the past. let's not forget that. If they do bad, what happens to Acuna? Does he just say, oh, you know what, we're kind of out of it, I'm just going to chill here?
Yeah.
I mean, he was great when the lights were bright as we were making the postseason
there were
push.
things to lose, yeah.
Like there was, I mean, this huge, like these massive games, so he was, fully trying his best. Is that always going to be the case? So, I mean, listen, if you're talented enough to where you're like, oh, I'll just be great when I feel like being great, I mean, wow, what a problem to have. And listen, I know his brother is Ronald Acuna and what have you, but it's pretty interesting to me. And listen, we know the talent is there, but we'll see, because now he's in a platoon role. So if and like we just had Pat Ragazzo on here a few minutes ago, he said the Mets are going to keep Jeff McNeil. As much as Carson might dislike McNeil, a lot of people have criticism of Jeff McNeil. Jeff McNeil is going to be here. He's in the mix.
Yeah.
If Brett Baty's playing well, again, where is the guaranteed job for Luis Angel Acuna? So when this regular season starts, if he wants to be on the team, he needs to try. He needs to not be bored, because if he's going to be bored and not giving his all, he's not going to be here. So, I mean, you better, like Lindor said, the players kind of figure out when to turn it on. I want to see it, turn on as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I mean, I'm not saying like there needs to be like some hints or whatever. If there needs to be some like hints around the league or not the league, excuse me, around the clubhouse or anything, and there's a way that you need to read between the lines, is it possible that Lindor is just kind of saying this in a way where it's like he thinks that he can be a lot better and he believes that, with the ability that he does have, because we know that he does have tools that you can't really teach, that there's tools there that he can fill into the margins. And, I've always been someone who, I'm not, we already know with Baty, I'm one of his biggest critics because I'm just not really, that big on him. I just really have not really seen much of this entire major league consistency. And, right now it looked good and it seems like he's been working really hard to improve. When it comes to Acuna as the alternate situation in this second base conversation right now, regardless of what happens with Jeff McNeil, because at this current moment he is injured. When it comes to Acuna, I never was one we'll just give it to Acuna because I rather Acuna than Baty because Baty I'm not very big on. Neither of them I've really have been very, very high on, but I mean, we're seeing Brett Baty make adjustments. We're seeing Brett Baty try to at least get better. We'll see if it translates there. But when it comes to Acuna, and if you're getting some work ethic, concerns here, I don't know, that's a little bit concerning in the way where you're I don't know. It also opens it up as to where, Jose Iglesias probably could have been somebody to help him out there. Lindor, obviously, of course. But I think in terms of the role that he's playing here, I do have a little bit of a concern. I'm not going to say that I'm completely negating it and saying it's fully overblown. What I'm saying is I do have a little bit of a concern that it's okay, well, he's not going to get all of the playing time in the majors with Baty here and him here, even just before Jeff McNeil is even healthy. Is he gonna kind of feel a little discouraged in that way? I feel I don't want to say it's a mental head case situation, or it's just a thing where he just he's not as motivated, but it's it's alarming in some way. I'm not trying to say that Lindor is the guy who's, fully administrating that. And I say that, he should say that because he's right. What I'm saying, it's kind of alarming to hear that as to where he's the bright lights come on and that's it. We're kind of going to need a little bit more of a fuller player, because, we talk about it and make the jokes all the time of the Lucas Duda home runs where they mean nothing or whatever. If you're doing a little bit of the opposite there, it's going to really be hard, even though he has come up big or whatever, it's going to be really hard to advance your career as a young player because as you get farther and farther there, I don't know what really is the point in this one. Hearing him just say he acts like he doesn't care and he's very lackadaisical in that way. It's strong words coming from Lindor. And this was one comment that from one of my guys here on Twitter, shout out to Daniel Wexler here, saying Lindor is never really critical of his teammates. It sure feels like he's politely sending a message to his young teammate. And, I think that we'll see how all of this pans out here. Obviously, they have some time as to, whoever plays better, whatever is going to be, alongside Jeff McNeil or something in that way. Acuna's going to get his chance here. So it's not like he's not going to, but it's just very, very weird to see, from both sides where, Brett Baty working very hard this offseason. We saw Murphy Vientos work very, very hard last offseason. And then we're seeing things with Acuna where it seems like he's only the bright lights guy, which I'm sure we love a guy in the bright lights, but it's where's the consistency here? That's kind of what I'm asking. And because who knows if he's just never going to, amount to that consistent playing time. Because again, it's not going to be there forever because we already know that Jet Williams is in that formula for the second base job. Is there a place in center field? Maybe he needs a new position to be interested or whatever. But catering in that way to a guy who hasn't proven much at the major leagues, even though he was good here for a second, I don't know. There's a little bit of concern. I'm a little bit holding back here where I'm okay, this is second base is going to be a little bit more of a position to focus on than I thought. to be honest, going into this year. I don't know if that's how you feel. It's just it's a very weird concept to see both sides of Baty, Acuna, obviously Jeff McNeil pushing, pushing, not, knocking on the door because he's going to get the starting job when he comes back. So I don't know. That's just weird. It's weird to me. I don't know if that's how you feel.
The thing that I'm really curious about is that, again, let's say McNeil is healthy and Acuna gets sent down. If Jet Williams is outplaying Acuna in AAA, well, why would the Mets not just call up Jet Williams? Because, again, it's like if you're a front office and you're saying, okay, I need to make an addition to my team, there's an injury or, something happens, and I have to decide between Jet Williams and Acuna, and I see that Williams' numbers are significantly better, and he's a higher-ranked prospect than Acuna is, wouldn't I just call up Jet Williams? So it's like if he's going to go down to AAA and not really try it and not have great numbers, I just don't understand why. That's kind of where I can see the Mets being in a weird spot. They're like, is he trying? Should we still call him up even though the numbers don't look great? So I'm just kind of curious to see how they're going to go about that decision-making process.
Yeah. Matt saying major credit to Lindor, though. That's my captain. Absolutely. I mean, that's what you want to see a leader say. Obviously you wish it wasn't as public as it was. But, I think at some point, some things do need to be said. And, this is a word of Lindor, who's now a veteran. He's been here for quite a while. He's definitely earned that right as to where he can, be able to speak for a decent amount of the team. We know that he brought this team together well. He was one of the pieces that was the main reason as to why they went on that National League Championship run. And I think at some point, a lot of this is going to be figured out. But we will see how they can confirm this. Now, some people are, talking about, sending Acuna down and retaining Canario if there are some concerns in this way. I feel like that probably would be something that would be considered if McNeil was healthy, if McNeil was actually here. It's really hard because, again, if you were to bring up Canario for the opening day roster, who, listen, has had a good spring, no doubt about it, doesn't really have much experience here, and I feel like it's more coming from this recency bias of him hitting 2 home runs in that spring game yesterday. But if you were to bring up Canario, I'm pretty sure you would have 7 outfielders on the team, and then also you'd have no backup infielder. I mean, who would, I guess Luis Torrens would be your backup infielder. like you have a depth chart that's going to be really uneven in that way. I saw some people, the DFA Taylor, even though he homered as well in that game, get rid of Marte, which we talked about with Pat, no one's really going to take that money. Again, they're kind of in this log jam where, like, right now they don't really have a spot for Canario, which kind of sucks because I do kind of want to see a little bit of it. But I think, with the lack of experience, it's not really something worth carrying 7 outfielders for. Because I think that right now the Mets have gone to a point where they don't need to have guys playing out of position anymore. Like, we're at a point where it just can't really be something that, these guys should be playing in their everyday positions. We're not in the era where Dom Smith has to play left field, or you have to put JD Davis in the outfield, or you have to put Lucas Duda in the outfield. Jesus Christ, we've done this so many times. But I don't know if that's like kind of the feeling you have too. It's kind of just like it's a sunk loss, because I think Canario has some talent, but it's like, if you want 7 outfielders, like I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think so.
It's a shame because he's 24 and you could clearly see he has power. Yeah. I mean, he was, when the Mets made the trade for the Cubs, at one point he was a pretty good ranked prospect for the Cubs. So,
he was in the Chris Bryant trade.
Yeah, you go.
I mean, he was one of the coveted pieces. Yeah.
There you go. So, I mean, this is someone that, like, he's not a complete out of nowhere guy. Like, no, this is someone that's been scouted as having talent. You see the talent when he swings and hits the ball. There's some swing and miss in there for sure, but he has a hard swing. So, when he makes contact, it's going to go a long way. So, he's intriguing because of the tools that he possesses. But, like you said, when we're talking about roster fit, it just doesn't work out right now. I mean, you added Juan Soto, you added Tyrone Taylor, you brought back Jesse Winker. Like, you just have, and you already have Nimmo here long term. Like, like you said, just already have so many outfielders that there's not much you really could do, unfortunately. And you're going to need the other infielders. With, like you said, with McNeil down and Baty's there, you literally do not have another infielder that can move around. Senjer is a catcher, Sorensen's a catcher. Alonso plays first, Vientos plays third. Like, even those guys can't really move around. Like, no, and none of those outfielders that we listed have played an infield position. So it's like you literally can't do anything to make it work, unfortunately. Like, he just does not fit on the roster.
Well, you have about 48 hours until like that roster comes out. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to, maybe move him for something. I don't know if that's something that they try to do. I feel like he's just going to end up getting DFA'd either way, and they're just going to kind of cut the bait, and he probably will be picked up by a team that's looking for young talent. We know that the White Sox will pretty much take anyone with a pulse. I think, there's other teams out there that probably will look at Canario and give him a chance, which kind of stinks. But with him being out of minor league options, it was definitely a good look to it. I think that we also had, brought him in a few weeks ago, and we saw it as something as to where, okay, maybe Nimmo's just not healthy. Maybe Marte's not healthy. Maybe there's just something out there that they had a little bit of a concern for and they need insurance for. Looks like Brandon Nimmo's ready to start the season now. Marte is alive. He's there, right?
He played the outfield.
We'll see. Yeah, he did play the outfield. So we'll see how long, he's out there. He's slotted to be in as the DH on opening day, that with them facing a lefty. So we'll see how all of that kind of gets panned out. Easy saying I could see the Yankees picking up Canario. I don't know if he even will get to them, because like, again, it's like the I think it's the list of like records last year where it's the waiver wire. If he ends up clearing waivers and getting out ready to AAA, you catch it as a win, and he goes out to AAA. And if you do end up having some type of injury, then he would be the first guy up. So it's unfortunate that had to happen, but it happens. Yeah.
I will say just one more quick note on the outfield. I found it very interesting that we were talking about Brandon Nimmo and his health. To see him play center field the other day, I thought was really fascinating. I mean, somebody that was coming off a foot injury, then you had this
He played the entire game today.
Yeah, and he played the entire game today. So, I mean, he's looking pretty healthy. I mean, because last year, center field, only 28 games. So I don't know if that's something they might want to experiment a little more with, because then it would allow you to move one of Siri or Taylor. If you really want to keep Canario, is you would have Nimmo play some center field, and then you'd move one of the center fielders away and then put Canario in a corner occasionally. But like we said, I just don't really see the path where he gets that playing time enough to where he warrants being able to stay as well. Because again, like Juan Soto has an outfield spot, Nimmo has an outfield spot, and it's just tough to take out Siri despite his offensive shortcomings with how great he is defensively. And again, we're talking about fit, how he fits in a corner with Soto, in a corner with Nimmo. It's just hard to make a spot for Canario despite the power.
Yeah, and then also you kind of get into that situation with him where he just kind of would be in the same situation where he was with the Cubs. The Cubs seemed to like not really give him much of a chance. They didn't give him much playing time. It seemed like he was going in and out of AAA mainly because, the options that ran out. But I think, it wouldn't be fair to him either way, even if you put him on this opening day roster, because he's probably not going to get that much playing time. And then also I think somebody said in the chat's asking if he can play center field. He doesn't usually. I think he's more of a corner outfield guy. So I guess we'll have to see. what happens, but if I were to guess, I do think that he will end up getting DFA'd, and he will be picked up by somebody on the waiver wire before he clears waivers and goes to AAA. I hope that we end up keeping him, and that would be awesome if it does happen. But we will see. They have not made any announcement yet, so fingers crossed that something happens, and we hope that they make somewhat of a decision. Anyways, Explosive saying Soto clogging up the right field for Canario. I agree. I think it's time to let go of Juan Soto, to be honest. I feel like this has been a long time coming. Let's just say that. And then, you also have some other guys in that outfield as well that's been talked about. Jose Azocar has also had a really good season, good spring too. Could be somebody else that they call on during the middle of the year if there is any other injuries. So, we will see how that all fans out there. But I do want to get into a segment that I think everybody loves, everyone's favorite segment, which would be the final one of spring training, and that being studs and duds. We can kind of go from the whole spring that they've had, maybe these last few weeks, the recency bias, the non-recency bias. We can list out quite a few here because spring is pretty much done here. Frank, I'll go to you for your stud of the week, or spring. You can go as much as you want, nothing limited to just one player, because we've had quite a few good spring training performances this spring.
Yeah, I'm actually going to guess the guy we just finished talking about, Alexander Canario. I mean, having a multi-home run game, grand slam in there. He had a few home runs this spring, and really, just getting him for cash considerations, you don't think much of it. You're like, oh, well, here's just another outfielder for the team. But he played really well. And listen, I know Marte, he hit a home run as well the other day, but you look at the final total of spring, Marte hits 208, Canario hits 306. Not saying he's a better player, not saying he's got a better season than Marte, but he did outplay him in spring training. And, different circumstances. Marte was also dealing with health, as we know. But it's just unfortunate because he's run into just two tough situations. I mean, in Chicago, we talk about the Mets adding Juan Soto, but the Cubs add Kyle Tucker. So that clogs up your outfit. You already have Seiya Suzuki. You have the next big thing, Pete Armstrong in center field. You have Ian Happ. You have Ian Happ for a long time. So he's just been in two organizations where they have a lot of outfielders. So despite the talent, despite the power, he has not really been able to get a fair shot. So I love what he provided. Like you said, I wish we could have kept him, but no options left. And the way the roster shook out, the way it fits, is not going to happen, I don't think.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the main guy today, Brandon Nimmo, tying the game on the big swing that he had. He has been hot this last week or two. Good to see going into spring training. I know that we've had some concerns about his health. Obviously, we have throughout his entire career. But I think, there's tons of guys that you can mention here. Obviously, Brett Baty has had a good spring, but I need to see this in the regular season before I elevate him to the stud level. I'm sorry. Everyone shoot me. Sorry. But Matt saying stud for the spring, he would say Kranick. Clay Holmes has had a great spring, of course. Jesse Winker has had a pretty solid spring as well. Griffin Canning is another one we can put out there. If there's anybody else in the stud category you want to throw out there this spring, because we've seen some really good performances. Let's just say that.
A lot of guys have gotten the job done. Like you said, Baty's the big one. We've seen a few guys do pretty well. I feel like Hayden Senger, he actually has been better than I thought. He's hit some balls pretty hard.
I think he's thrown out like 7 runners or something.
Luis
this
Torrens
spring.
has been good this spring, with the bat especially. So we've seen a lot of guys play well for the most part. You didn't really have too many guys that didn't get the job done. So I think overall it was a good spring for a lot of people. Like we said, Brazaban, we talked about him earlier. He's been good, surprisingly. Mm-hmm. Griffin Canning really blew my expectations. Obviously Clay Holmes. A lot of guys have been really good. And not so much guys you expected as well. So that's been a big key too.
Yeah. It kind of sucks that we didn't get to see more of kind of the young guys such as Gilbert and Mauricio. Both of them did not play any spring games.
And obviously Tong was great too. We talk about
Jonah Tong was really good. Ryan Clifford, of course, the big home run, getting the first team on all spring breakout, which is great. So, we'll see how, all this stuff forms out, but I think we can get to the dud category. There's been kind of a trend here, I'd say, throughout the month, which it's not like, I think we all can say Lindor has not had a great spring. I think we know he hasn't. Anything new? Not really. We've seen this happen so many times where he starts off slow. It seems like towards the end there, he started to get a little bit more comfortable, but we saw some rough ABs from him. Are we going to freak out about it in April? I'm sure there's going to be some WFAN calls about it. It happens. I mean, I'm not freaking out about it. We've seen this happen, I don't know, 4 times already. I mean, I feel like at one point it's all going to even out. If there's anybody else that you want to put out there, I know that we've talked about a few guys who've it's been rough for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it to one of the guys today. AJ Minter, he gives up the run, finishes with a 5.79 ERA. And again, maybe he's not healthy, but I do think that if he does make the opening day roster, you're basically saying he is healthy. And we have the expectations of high leverage reliever as one of our top guys, because we're not really going to throw Budo into that role. We're not sure what's going to happen with Reed Garrett. Even Stanek today, he wasn't great. I mean, it was a battle. He could not get through the first inning, the one inning they wanted him to pitch, because his command was kind of all over the place. So really you're hoping is Minter as the other guy to help out with Diaz in the back half of that bullpen. And to finish with ERA around 6, not what you want to see. Again, will he make the opening day roster? Maybe. They said he was supposed to. They said everything's been okay. But I do wonder if after today they're like, maybe since we have good options in Kranick and Brosbaum, we can give them a shot while making sure Minter is 100%. Because when he is here, we're going to want him in a high leverage role. And you want him to be performing well in order to do that.
Yeah, so Minter probably, if he does end up on the IL to start the year, just to, maybe he's just not ready. That means that Brazaban and Kranick will probably both be on the opening day roster. So we'll see. Obviously, with him being left-handed, it kind of sprinkles out the situation there. But we'll see how all of that kind of pans out there. Diaz, we can put in there. It's been a little bit of a rough spring for him. I think at some point, it'll probably be a topic of discussion of, the velocity dip and things like that. We talked a little bit about that last week. I think at some point, I hope that it revamps itself, the pitch shape's still there. The stuff is still there. It's just, the regaining of the velocity. Hopefully we see it back at some point. Cause towards the end of the year last year, he started to bring it up a little bit. So we'll see what happens with him. Other guys we can point out. Blackburn, rough spring for him, up and down. He had a few decent outings, few not. We'll see how that kind of fizzles out. We know he's going to be on the opening day roster. He's probably going to start off in the bullpen. We've seen times where I think there is a stretch in May or whatever where they have 13 straight days where they're going to be playing. So he'll probably make a start there if he is healthy. We know we have injury concerns with him. But, going into opening day, I'd say that a lot of things have been figured out. A few things have yet to be announced. But I think at some point, we will figure out what the identity of this team is. Obviously, the first impression, the first game will determine if the season is over or not, like we always do. A few other notes that I do want to add in here. Kodai Senga, they said he's going to be on a pitch limit to start off this year. Probably the main reason as to why is because they're going with a 5-man rotation to start off the year. But as we continue to get healthier and as they expand to a 6-man rotation in some way, because of course Senga used to that type of workload in Japan, it seems like the first few starts he's going to have, it's going to be like 75 to 80 pitch limit in some way. So hopefully we don't see that many walks and he can dazzle through, I don't know, 6 or 7 innings to start off the season, which is fine, of course. Like the home stretch is more of what we need these pitchers to perform in. And, I feel like, piecing together 162 games is a lot better than, piecing together a fantasy team that we think will just do well because they have great players. Things are going to happen. So again, I'm okay with them doing things, at that slow pace. I don't know if that's something that you agree with him. It's been a while since we've seen him healthy, but I'm okay with it if that's just to start off April. That's fine because, getting into the swing of things, it's whatever.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we want him to be on the field. I mean, that was the thing last year, multiple injuries. We didn't really get to see what was happening there. And we know the potential that he has. And we know what he's capable of. We know he could be a big piece for them. So we need to keep him healthy. And like we said, hopefully Mania is not too far away. So, like we said, maybe with Senga, it's for a few weeks to a month. And then Mania comes in and things hopefully look a lot better. Him getting to work on that 6-day rotation. It stinks that Blackburn hasn't been good enough to just start off with the 6-man rotation. But it's like, you know what, once you had the Mania injury and the Montas injury, you are really hard pressed there. I mean, despite Canning pitching well, despite Clay Holmes looking really good, even McGill pitching well, it just wasn't enough to still make that 6-man rotation for him.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how they piece it together is pretty much everything because they're going to need these innings no matter what. And it's not just going to be 5 guys pitching 200 innings. I mean, that's literally just not a reality anymore in this game. Another thing that I do want to point out, which is more of just like more of a miscellaneous thing here. Our guy Mark Canha, this is like the 4th time he has been traded in like the past 2 years. We obviously traded him to the Brewers. The Brewers trade him to the Tigers the last offseason. The Tigers trade him to the Giants. The Giants let him go, and he goes to Milwaukee, back to Milwaukee, and then Milwaukee trades him to the Royals. So I guess life of a big leaguer there, but he has been passed around for this past 2 years after I think he was in Oakland for quite a while from the very beginning. So it was odd. It was odd to see that because he's really very, very weird.
And we know the Mets had offered him a contract in the offseason. It was a minor league deal, but he could have been back with the Mets. I mean, I don't think they would have traded him if they got him, but he's someone that, good clubhouse guy. Don't make any real estate choices quite yet, though, because you might be on the move again.
Yeah.
You don't want to buy a location and then you're on the move. So hopefully got figured out. Royals were obviously maybe looking for an outfielder in the offseason.
Yeah, we know that.
Call for Starling Marte, and it went Mark Canha for much cheaper. So, and they get to hang on to, not even get rid of any other players.
I was just going to bring that up actually with them looking for outfield. They had the interest in Starling Marte, so maybe Canha is more of the fit into that formula as well. We know he's a right-handed bat as well, so you never know. I think at this point we're just ready for opening day. I think that. We have had a very, very long off season, and obviously with the pace that it has gone. Now, as for the programming on here on our channel, we are going to be going live on Wednesday. Me and Andrew will be here to do a little bit of a preview for opening day. Frank will not be here for that, but that's probably the main reason as to why we are kind of cutting it short here. So we'll trying to split things up. And then, of course, we will be starting to go live following every single series. And how they kind of fit in between series is how they will be scheduled. Best way to know is following us on Twitter. We usually have an announcement if we do go live. But you can probably keep up with that schedule. Some streams are going to be different than others. I mean, last year, we had, what was it? We had the hurricane kind of make us stream 4 times in 5 days towards the end of the season. I mean, there's some scheduling that makes it all go crazy. But we will see what happens. going forward. I'm sure that we'll get a little bit more of a clear answer on the the 26-man roster that will be in the opening day roster in these next few days. So I'm sure we will be able to talk about some of that. Thank you to Pat Ragazzo for joining us for the first 30 to 40 minutes of this stream. Make sure, guys, to go follow him. All of his links are in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube and on Twitter, make sure to head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe, put on post notifications if you have not already, to not miss new episodes of this podcast that are now recorded live. Following every single series, we will have one more one more spring training-ish episode on Wednesday, and we will go on from there. And the regular season grind is now upon us, where after every 3 to 4 games, we will be live to give you guys coverage, and we will yap forever, yap your ear off, and hopefully you guys are in for it too. Frank, I will go to you for any final words that you want to put out there. Of course, the Mets Frankly post games will be back as well, following every single game. Make sure to follow us on all those social medias for that too. And I don't know if I'm missing anything, but yeah, all yours.
Yeah, like you said, thank you to Pat Ragazzo for joining us. We really appreciate his time and insight. And the regular season starts, so it starts for all of us. The workload increases for everybody. The Mets are out there every day. We're going to be out there every day between Mets Frankly post games and the recap series and previewing series and all the fun stuff in between. So it's going to be another fun season. We're ready to get it done, and let's go Mets.
Yeah. The grind does not stop for us here at Mets Weekly. We will always be here to talk New York Mets with you guys. But as for everybody in here right now, everybody watching, hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you guys so much for watching. For those of you listening on audio, make sure to subscribe. Hit the like button as well. It'd be greatly appreciated on your way out to not miss when we do go live. Turn on those post notifications. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok. Mainly features the Mets Frankly post game, which will be coming back during the regular season. Follow all of us individually, including our third co-host, Andrew, who's not here today, but we will be here on Wednesday. Guys, 162 games are ahead of us. It is a long season, a long journey. Starts once again 2025. And we have Juan Soto for it this time. So it should be a lot more fun, even more fun than it was last year, even though it was more fun like a roller coaster, not a fun, this is amazing. Very overwhelming last year. Let's try not to start off as slow as we did last year. Anyways, final message, of course. Let's go Mets, and we will see you guys next time.